It's seemingly inevitable that everything that has already occurred on Venus will happen to Earth in time. And that's because the sun is still getting older, which means it's still getting hotter, which means the habitable zone is still expanding outwards. And seeing as Earth is the next planet from the sun, we're the next world scheduled to be bumped out of it. We know that the sun will become a red giant in around 5 billion years' time, completely engulfing Earth as it does so. But really, our star will grow too hot for us to live here in only 1 billion years. That's when it's predicted that the luminosity increase will be too much for life on Earth to withstand. Again, the heat Earth will experience will be enough to evaporate our oceans, triggering most of the same processes that have already systematically destroyed Venus. According to some theories, life could still exist on Venus, but if it does, it's exceptionally hardy. More likely, if there ever was life there, it was destroyed by the rising temperatures and the clogging carbon dioxide. So if humans are still around on Earth in a billion years' time, they'd be subject to the same unenviable situation. In fact, over the course of those 1 billion years, Mars may have effectively become the new Earth, drawn further into the habitable zone and potentially turned into a more livable prospect. Another reason, perhaps, why we seem so keen to migrate to Mars before anywhere else, on a cosmological scale, it buys us a lot of time. For the most part, we are dealing in timescales of potentially millions of years. Earth isn't going to turn into Venus overnight, but some fear that the impact of humans on Earth could be fast-tracking the situation. Our dependence on fossil fuels has long been held under the scientific and media spotlight. By continuously releasing carbon into the atmosphere, we could be pushing Earth toward a Venus-like fate more quickly than would otherwise have happened. The current conditions on Venus took hundreds of millions of years to develop, but Earth might not be afforded so long to transition. However, some scientists are a bit more optimistic. On the other side of the argument, Venus could have simply been unlucky in its evolution, as the rise in temperature might not have been enough to explain the evaporating oceans and overload of carbon. Instead, NASA's Anthony Del Genio proposes that Venus might have had some other sudden, unexplained change, perhaps in its core. Or it might have at one time been impacted by another solar system planet entering into its orbit. Both alternative situations would have kickstarted huge fundamental changes for sure, but neither are scenarios we anticipate happening to Earth. Even if Earth's eventual fate is to become another Venus, if it's more predictably as a result of the sun growing hotter, then we at least have time to address the problem. Relying on fossil fuels for too much longer won't do us any good, with Stephen Hawking once saying that we're turning ourselves into Venus with our current climate decisions. But even beyond man-made climate change, it seems as though Earth will naturally join its twin in time, purely thanks to the sun growing inevitably hotter. The good news is that by the time that happens, humans should be advanced enough to have evacuated Earth in search of someplace new. It might be Mars, but even the red planet would serve only as a temporary fix. Ultimately, with our star's habitable zone continuing to expand outwards, we either need to find a way to move the planets with it, or we find a way to leave the solar system altogether. Thankfully, these seismic cosmological changes aren't expected to happen in the near future, but that's why Earth actually is turning into Venus.